four different levels of exams in the oral English exams. There's a primary level, junior level, intermediate, and advanced. Now, these exams could be taken independently of each other, but really it's better to follow them in sequence because skills learned in younger exams are then built upon for the older exams. Each exam requires some sort of prepared work by the candidate, and that's what I'd like to talk about first. Let's start with the primary level. And Susan, could you talk about the prepared work at the primary level? And what is the general age of a primary student?
All right. Thank you. I'm happy to talk about this. What I would like to say about the primary exams is that the prepared work does involve the memorization of a poem. And this can sound a little daunting. The expected age for a student taking this exam is about 8 or 9 or even 10 years old, depending on how long you've been studying English and what your school offers for you. The poetry that we have for you to study from is quite varied. We've put together a selection of about 30 different poems, and this is our syllabus or our guide for pieces that you should be performing from. They cover all sorts of different topics. We have one about a haunted house. We have one about a magician. We have several about animals and fairies and all sorts of different experiences and activities. The poems are not long, and they're quite easy to memorize with some repetition in them. We generally recommend that you start several weeks before you're actually performing, and that you hopefully with your teachers are studying lots of different poems, and then you can choose the one that you really like. Memorizing the poetry encourages you to play with words and to have that experience of how words fit together, how you can have fun with them. It gives you an experience of rhyme and wordplay, and also an opportunity to build your vocabulary so you can find out about the meanings of words. When you present the poem, we don't want it just to be about the rhythm and the rhyme, but we want you to be telling us the story of what's going on. And so you get to have the opportunity to use your own interpretation and your own view of what it might be. So that's sort of what it's like when you memorize a poem for the primary level for the ISA Oral English exam.
Thanks very much, Susan. Yes, that memorization of a poem at an early age is a really critical part in learning the language. So I think it's an important skill. The exams will be online. And of course, having an online exam brings its own challenges, but it also brings many opportunities as well. And we as examiners have worked both in live situations and in online exams. Now, let's turn our attention to the junior level and the prepared, and I'll have Jim Dobbin talk about the prepared work at the junior level. And also, Jim, tell us about the approximate age of a student at that level.
The junior level exam is, the students are usually around 10 or 11 years old. So they've had a little experience now in English classes and speaking English. And the prepared work is quite interesting because they're asked to relate a story of a past experience that they've had. So it's personalizing the language. They get to work in past tense and to be able to bring their own experiences to the exam. It's only about 3 or 4 minutes long, and we usually ask that they bring an object or a photo along just to focus the exam around that. And it's a wonderful experience for them, and it's wonderful for the examiners because it leads naturally into a conversation that we will have with the students later on. But we ask that the students deliver this in a conversational, natural manner that isn't recited and isn't memorized. So it's a big challenge.
Yes, it's a very important task at that level. And as you say, we examiners often remember the students' past experiences because they are so unique and personal. Now let's turn our attention to the intermediate exam, and I'll have Vincent Hanlon talk about the prepared work for that exam and the approximate age of the student.
Thanks, Grant. Yes, the student ages for the intermediate exams are usually 13, 14-year-olds, and building on the personal experience speech that the junior candidates present. During their intermediate exam, they get to give a speech or present a speech of 4 to 5 minutes. And what it does is it sort of takes them out into the larger world. These speeches can be descriptive speeches about an event or a personality. Could be someone like Lewis Hamilton, the Formula One driver, or about the Martian rover experience that people were excited about earlier this year. It can also be a persuasive speech that they may be talking about something, for instance, say, why the war on drugs has failed, okay? Bullying in our schools, what can we do about it? And then finally, we can also have speeches. The students can be encouraged to prepare an entertaining or a humorous speech. For instance, how learning to juggle saved my life, something like that. And they'll speak on this for 4 or 5 minutes. It requires the writing makes demands upon the speaker in terms of creating an organized speech, a short, relatively brief speech with a engaging introduction, a series of important points, illustrated perhaps with examples, and then with a conclusion that wraps up the major points covered in the speech. So there is that element that is required of the students as they work at this level of sort of rhetorical presentations. And again, it's one step along the journey of becoming very comfortable in the public presentation of your ideas in a second language.
Thank you, Vincent. Yes, it's very important for the student to present their speech and feel personally invested in their speech, I think. When we get to the advanced category, that speech aspect of the exam becomes an impromptu speech. So the student only has 20 minutes to prepare their speech. They're given a list of topics from which they must choose one of the topics. They're given 20 minutes to prepare, and then they come into the exam room with their impromptu speech. So that's another level from that prepared speech to the impromptu speech. The students at the advanced level are now in older years in high school, maybe 15, 16, 17 years of age. And their English is usually very good by this time, and they are having to think on their feet in that impromptu speech. The other prepared work at the advanced level is the memorization of a poem or a scene or a piece of prose or something from a famous historical speech. And this builds on the memorization component of the lower level exams, but now we're at a much higher level of dealing with literature. And once again, the examiners have prepared an anthology of possible works for the advanced students to choose from for this exam. And we ask that, like the lower grades, that the work be memorized accurately, and not just, it shouldn't sound memorized or just delivered by rote, but should sound like the student has internalized the piece and are interpreting it on their own. So really the advanced level is the culmination of all these younger levels and all the tasks that are building up to that advanced level.